Now we'll get into Brush Street Beat presented by McLaren Health Care. And today's guest is Tigers beat writer for MLive, Evan Woodberry. Evan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
We are happy to have you, and we're going to talk some Tigers baseball, which I actually read the article that you posted yesterday to MLive, and I thought you made some very interesting points about the kind of streaky season that the Tigers are having. And right now they're on the bad side of that streaky season. They are 3-10 since September 2nd. And I want to know, how much of this, if any, do you attribute to the fact that the Tigers had some key injuries when it comes to CJ Cron and Jacoby Jones?
I think it's huge. And if you look at the two key moments that kind of started losing streaks for the Tigers this year, the first one was CJ Cron early in the year. They were 9-5. They were off to a very nice start. And CJ Cron got hurt. They went on a 9-game losing streak. They bounced back. They recovered. They had a great stretch. And then in Milwaukee, Jacoby Jones was hit by a pitch. That started another losing streak that they're currently on right now. They've gone 3-10 during that stretch. So obviously, when things go well, there's a lot of factors. When things go poorly, there's a lot of factors. But for a team that is still trying to build its depth, to have two key injuries to two players that were really productive offensively takes a big chunk out of the lineup. And that's really those are the two big names, but also they've lost Nico Goodrum. Christian Stewart was demoted after really not performing offensively as well as the Tigers had hoped. So there's large chunks of the lineup that when things were going well, were really hitting. We're doing well, and that during the losing streaks have really suffered.
When you look at the amount of injuries, and I really cannot believe, I know CJ Cron was a real major injury for them, obviously, but Jacoby Jones seemed to finally be on the verge when they got him from Pittsburgh. I can remember he was considered a top prospect for the Pirates. He was right on the verge 2 years in a row breaking his hand. Can you talk about his development, and is he, for lack of a better term, Evan, and I hate to use this on you, has he arrived in the major leagues, do you think, Jacoby Jones? Does he finally get it?
I think so. I think it's probably immensely frustrating to him that he doesn't have, it wasn't going to be a full season under any circumstances, but he doesn't have a 60-game season to show it at the very least. Because I remember last year he talked about how devastated he was when he was hit by a pitch and broke his hand because he was just getting things on track offensively, felt like he'd really found himself. This year comes out, has a great year, gets hit in the hand again, breaks his hand again. I imagine he's immensely frustrated by that. But the fact is he has put together, it's not just a stretch in 2019. He's had that really nice stretch in 2019. He came back, did it again in 2020. So I think absolutely that things are looking up for him from that perspective. I think you can obviously pencil him in as a Tiger starting outfielder in 2021. It's just one of the frustrations of this season that, was going to be short anyway, and to have it cut short further, especially when he was doing so well, I think is probably extraordinarily frustrating for him.
Evan, let's take a look at pitching. The Tigers have had some inconsistency in that position as well. You've got Spencer Turnbull, who has been pitching pretty well. Matt Boyd has had a couple good outings, and Casey Mize, his last outing was actually really good. But overall, the Tigers have had to rely on their bullpen a lot. How much has that impacted this season?
I think it has. I think, and you could kind of see when that back end of the bullpen was doing really well. Jose Cisnero, Gregory Soto, the team was winning, and during the recent streak, they've had some tough outings because, frankly, there's been a lot of pressure put on them just by the fact that the Tigers are so rarely having a pitcher go 5 or 6 innings, which used to be kind of the basic standard. But it's a combination of this being a really strange season, lack of preparation time for pitchers, and the fact that a lot of the Tigers starters just haven't been able to go very deep. And so that has put a lot of pressure on the bullpen. There have been certain cases where with Michael Fulmer, the Tigers were only going to go 3 innings. They've committed to that process. And that's every 5 days. There's only going to be, that's another outing that's going to put some pressure on the bullpen. So I think that's been part of the factor. I think there have been some bright spots. I think Cisnero in the big picture has been a bright spot. Gregory Soto in the big picture has been a bright spot. I think they just like to see, the last couple of weeks to have some good starts from the younger guys, Casey Mize, Tarek Skubal, go into 2021 with some momentum, get Michael Fulmer back on track, go into 2021 with some momentum. And even Matthew Boyd, who, when he's been good, has looked like the Matthew Boyd of last year. They just need to get him doing that consistently, and he just has a couple more starts this year to kind of ride into 2021 with some momentum.
Now, looking at some of the hitters, and hey, I know when you're pounding the beat every single day. I know how much of a grind at times that can be, but I'm kind of curious when you're looking at it though. Victor Reyes, Willie Castro, and Jamer Candelario have to be three pretty big bright spots for the Tigers this season.
I think absolutely. And Victor Reyes, I give him credit because I think there was a lot of, even among myself, there was some skepticism about whether 2019 was for real. He had kind of a really high batting average on balls in play, which inflated his batting average. And there's a thought that maybe there was some flukiness to that season. But he's come back and done it again. And he's been really good. And I think there is something to be said in an era where there's a lot of strikeouts and, just putting the ball in play and relying on your athleticism is really important. And he's developed power. He's really grown into his kind of tall, gangly body that we saw 2 years ago. He's filling out and he's adding power. I think he can be a really nice piece for this team going forward. And probably bigger than anything that is Jamer Candelario. I think the Tigers always thought and hoped he had this kind of production in him, and he'd shown glimpses of it over the last couple of years. But to have him put it all together, especially when he got off to a really tough start in July, was 0 for 17. And I think there was kind of thought, oh, gosh, here we go again. To have him turn it around and have the kind of incredible year. I mean, he's not just been the most productive hitter on the Tigers. He's been one of the most productive hitters in all of baseball, especially since August 1st, once he emerged from that early season slump. So that's pretty incredible. I think people were hopeful for Jamer, but I don't think anybody saw that coming. So that's been, if you're looking at bright spots, that's probably number one by a long shot. That the fact that they can look at Jamer as a big piece of the infield, whether it's at first base or third base going forward, and hopefully not just have an everyday player, but have a plus player that's going to be really an asset offensively.
Evan, another thing that you mentioned in one of your most recent posts on MLive regarding the streakiness of this Tigers team is that they've got a lot of young talent on this team, and evaluating them in a 60-game season can be hard as it is. But when they're playing inconsistently like they are, rather, how do you evaluate them?
I think it's extraordinarily tough, and I think that's going to be one of the most interesting things to watch this offseason. Is not only how the Tigers handle it, but how all of baseball handles it, because you're accustomed to evaluating players on a 162-game schedule when things kind of even out. The bad luck and the good luck evens out over 162 games. That's not always the case with a short season. And I used Nico Goodrum as an example, who's not necessarily a young player, but this was his first real season to have an everyday job and not just be a utility guy. And I thought he's looked fantastic at shortstop defensively. He's taken some lumps offensively. He's struck out too much at the plate. But I really think over the course of 162 games, he might be able to sort that out. But the Tigers are going to have to evaluate on a much shorter data points. And I think that's going to be real tough during the offseason. Willie Castro is an example on the good end. He's looked phenomenal. He's hit the ball. He's hitting like 330 something right now, I think. But I think that would probably come down to earth a little bit over the course of a 162-game season. So those are the challenges that they're going to have evaluating going into next year, because they're not going to have as many data points as they normally do, and they're going to have to extrapolate based on how they think things might have gone over the course of a longer season.
I think that the mantra for most Detroit sports fans, if not all sports fans, is hope for the best and expect the worst. And so going into this season, I don't know what my expectations were for the Tigers. So I guess in a way, and I'm not trying to be overly effusive with my praise, but I've been pretty encouraged by what I've seen. But the question I get, Evan, and now I'm going to ask you to put on your soothsayer cap here, is that people keep asking me, when are we going to see Torkelson? When are we going to see Riley Green? We know the pitching's there, and we're encouraged by what Mize and Scooble have done. So I'm kind of curious. I mean, Torkelson probably needs a year in the minors, but is Riley Green on a fast track? Can you predict what the future holds for those two players?
Well, I think the big factor is Riley Green was drafted out of high school, so the developmental track for a player like that is always going to be longer than a player drafted out of college, and certainly a player drafted out of a high-profile college like Spencer Torkelson, who was really the number one hitter in all of college baseball at a big, Division I university. The thing with Riley Green is this the Tigers did their best to make up for what would have been a lost year of development, putting him in Toledo, getting him work with all the organization's instructors, getting him work against basically big league quality pitching a good chunk of the time. But the reality is that he would have started this year in Class A West Michigan, and ideally would have then worked his way up organically. Once he conquered West Michigan, he would go to Lakeland. If he did conquer Lakeland, he would go to Erie. But I think the realistic, even under a best case scenario, if this had been a normal season, maybe he's starting 2021 in Erie and then works his way up, and maybe you're talking about a debut in 2022. That would be the normal track for a player coming out of high school like Riley Green. Now, can he go faster than that? Absolutely. But I think people should be aware that as a high school player, he's on a much different developmental track than Torkelson. I mean, in theory, if this had been a normal year, and Al Avila even said this, if this had been a normal year, let's say you send Torkelson to Erie, he hits there, you say, okay, let's give him a promotion to Toledo, see what he does. He hits there. Then I think maybe, hey, give him a shot here at the end of the year and see what happens. I just think they're hesitant to do that just because he hasn't been having a normal season. They've been playing intra-squad games. They've been doing the best they can in Toledo, but this hasn't been a normal season where he's been able to log day after day of 9-inning games, get to see a lot of pitchers, get to see a lot of at-bats. It's just been kind of an unusual year. But I think he's absolutely a guy you keep in the back of your mind for 2021. Maybe not initially, but before it's over, I would say absolutely.
Evan, really quickly, one final question for you. We're going to look ahead to the series with Kansas City and the rest of the season. As it seems the Tigers' playoff hopes are slipping further and further away, what exactly should they be focusing on for this next series and really the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of an interesting point. I mean, a few days ago, we're talking the playoffs, and now they're facing a Kansas City Royals team that has played really well. And if the Royals win both games, the Royals are going to jump over the Tigers in the standings. So the Tigers will have gone from talking about the playoffs to trying to avoid the basement. That's kind of the nature of the way this season goes, is that one good week or one bad week can be the difference between the playoffs and the bottom of the league. So I think, obviously ending on a high note is important. But more than that, just, they're at a point now where they've got a lot of young players that are just getting at bats. Daz Cameron has taken some lumps, but he's at least getting at bats. Isaac Paredes has taken some lumps, but he's at least getting at bats. And these are going to be data points that the Tigers can use going into next year as they evaluate how they're going to build the roster. Maybe they learned that Isaac Paredes isn't ready to be a major league third baseman. That's information that they wouldn't have had before. That's information they can use as they're building out the roster next year. Or maybe, they surprise them. Maybe Willie Castro keeps hitting and they think, okay, this is a part of our roster for 2021. We can build around him. Maybe Sergio Alcantara does really well and they think, okay, this guy could be a utility guy for 2021. So I think the last 2 weeks of the season are still valuable in that sense, and that they're still trying to learn about a lot of these young players, and they're going to get an opportunity.
Evan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it. And of course, a big thank you to McLaren Health Care for presenting Brush Street Beat right here on the Word on Woodward.